The woman in the coming door of the private room of the restaurant was carrying a photo, and before she had a word said, I knew that something she was about to say was going to almost break up the evening we'd worked out for 6 months by watching the expression change on my son's face. 50, perhaps 52, who wore a plain green coat, stood on the edge of the salle behind the maitre d', as if she had to speak her way in. My daughter-in-law, Karen, averted herself from the table. "Hey, what's happening?" she asked. "What's everyone about stopped doing for once at the head of the table?" My grandkids put their cake down. My son Michael got out his chair very quickly, and the chair dragged along the chair rail. Little man to Denise, "Don't do this here." She put the picture down on the white tablecloth right beside the anniversary cake with 38 unlit candles beside it. Well, Carol is gone, so I should have blown him out before she started asking me why not. And she blurted out, "I'm sorry to do this here, Frank, but I was calling him for 2 weeks, and he's not picking up." I gazed at the picture. Pillow faces of a little girl, perhaps age 6, no front teeth, and a boy that, fortunately, looked like Michael when he was the same age, stood next to him, but not to him. 3 weeks ago, we were none the wiser that this dinner was to be the end of the way. By then it was clear to me that I was seeing stuff. Well, I didn't add them up yet, but it has been now 14 months since my wife Carol's death, and this is the first dinner I have ever died for without her. I kept a one-way ticket reserved in the private table for the 41 years of, aka who was there? Party at Michael's suggestion, and since I took her to the table where she made her first date in 1984, I had to return to Corrigan's to discuss it with him. He was married to Karen for 6 years, had 2 children, 7 Tyler, and just 4 Emmett. He was 34 years old and owned a small insurance brokerage. Emma was just 4 and Tyler was 7. He was a sure thing. Each Sunday since the funeral, I got a call with no put-off. It came across as though it was for him to see me since his father had passed. Yes, it's more like the time when a guy finds out that his dad hasn't noticed him doing anything. 3 weeks before the dinner, Michael began to refuse taking my Sunday calls, saying work got extremely busy, but that he'll get back to me soon. And then he never did. Again on the same days, on and off answering Tuesday or Wednesday with the same reason. Over the past 3 weeks, an out-of-control client account. I recalled that it had been many months ago, and I had asked him if he'd found someone capable of escalations, which meant he wouldn't be getting weighed down with work on the weekends anymore. I didn't say anything. My only observation is that I just said, I noticed that used to be quiet when people were closing that door, and now it sticks a little bit. This portion of the story is from July 2011, when I saw his phone that same week. He started to keep it flat on the table during our dinner date. Never had before, and once, when it buzzed twice consecutively, he lifted it, looking at it, and then he turned off the gadgets ringing without reading the message. To me, this was weird for a person who was picking up his work call at the dinner table without even thinking. Karen dropped by my house alone one Thursday afternoon, a time when I had a feeling it wasn't a typical Thursday. Karen visited my house without her husband one Thursday afternoon, not a day she chose to make. Sounds familiar? She lingered in my kitchen long time. She was not. She was talking about nothing, at one point taking great care to ask if Michael had been treated differently by me in recent time. He said he was kept quite busy. I told her that I told her he looked very busy. That's one word, busy birdie. She said quietly and changed the subject in a flash. If I had been surprised at just any comment, I would have thought it was in my imagination. I didn't press her. I let her get away with the dish still sitting untouched on my counter, and went to my kitchen table after her and turned the sentence over. The credit card statement was actually received 3 weeks in advance to the dinner. Michael and I had opened a joint account years before to pay the deposit on the dinner, and he would pay for all the add-on catering. I read the statement to see if anything out there was in it regarding the deposit on Corrigan's, and there it was, but scrolling past it, a charge I didn't recognize. I found a flower shop and sent him some $41, a florist, the same Tuesday that Michael told me he was working late that Tuesday. I found out a florist's address. It was in a town that was an hour away, and one that I didn't know that Michael had any relation whatsoever with. I leaned on that for a good. long while before I did something that I'm not proud of. I called the florist right away and informed them that I believed that the flowers had been charged improperly. I was still a little bit surprised that my shivering hand dialed the number of a small business, and I'm a 68-year-old man who's panicked when it comes to giving a call. But this time, I knew deep inside that I was standing at the edge of a precipice I could never turn back from once I had been at the other end to talk to him. All she could tell me on the phone was that the order had been sent to a home address, and that would be the only piece of information I'd need in order to get the full details of the order. If I came in with the card, I didn't go in. But on the back of an old receipt, I had written the address down and then sat in my study with me trying to do the usual math that any of us would do to find out what that address might be. In an out-of-town town I didn't know, a florist fee was covered as part of an anniversary card for washtub making. Michael, I didn't call on that night. I was worried about what I would hear, and I had a fear even I knew that, and it would only give the person the opportunity to put on a diffusion spin on it before I would have any chance to sound out in my own mind. But on a Saturday, all by myself and no one else informed, I drove to this town and parked opposite a small yellow house with a little swing set in the front yard. I sat there for 40 minutes without realizing quite which of two things I was hoping for or foreboding. It was 11:40 that morning when a car pulled into the driveway. The shopping cart corral was as far as the back bump of Michael's car. Out he came, and before he'd even arrived at the door, a little girl ran up to him, and he took her up in his arms and spun her around, spinning the way he used to spin the little Emma when she was younger. Out by them came a woman wiping her hands on a dish towel, quite at ease on the porch behind them. But not the first time, not the 10th. I didn't get out of my car, and there I sat while my son built a snowman with a little girl I never even met, in a life that I never knew existed, and 10 hours later never even knew that I had watched. That one moment made everything I knew about my son became a big question mark. Even to this day, I'm still mulling over that. Before I really depart from the car, this is one more thing I want to talk about from that hour in the car, okay? The little girl slipped, was caught under the arms, her hands examined for bruises and blisters, snow rubbed from a jacket. And before she'd even landed, Michael wept before her, before she'd even come to a halt. It was a simple, loving move, something any decent father will make spontaneously, and in his performance, for a child that I hadn't even known I didn't have bite into my own hand, and pledged to honor that in any child. He didn't tell a lie to us. Happily, he was being a father to her. 2, in a house I'd never be let into, and for this reason the whole thing was a bit more excused at the exact moment that it was entirely irreconcilable. I have not confronted him in that driveway, and I have been wondering over it many times since. There was a lot of cowardice in it. But part of it was something I learned in 30 years selling, negotiating with farmers that didn't have to spend money on equipment that they needed. Encounters with men before knowing how much you need to fear are only meant to make them more apt to fear you. I had to find out how long it had all been happening. Who else knew? Before I tell him I know something. After that stakeout, I picked up another guy from the car park, and when I got home, that was a different one to the one who'd gone out that morning. I want to be honest about the times which followed, over several days anyway, and they weren't heroic. I didn't jump to my feet and act immediately. On Tuesday, I visited Carol's grave twice more this week, a practice I hadn't conducted in more than a month, and spoke to a gravestone as if I would speak to someone whom I was embarrassed to admit I am still giving information to. I asked her in an open, solitary woodlet, at the middle of nothing, what she would have done. Obviously, I did not get an answer, but I heard myself saying the question, and that calmed me down to go at length talking the phone to call the military hospital anyway. So I called Karen. And no, I didn't ask her outright, but I asked her informatively whether she knew the name of the florist. After a long pause on the line, I knew what was before she finished speaking a word. Finally, in a tone that had never been in her voice before, but certainly was in hers this time, she said, "I think maybe I had better talk to you face-to-face or off the phone, and not this week, because either of us wouldn't get home to your anniversary dinner without it going awry." I said nicely to her, if anyone was having an affair, it was Michael. "It is not as it appears, but rather as it is intended," she said. It's not new. It's old, aged more than desired, out of taste. And I discovered by accident, by a receipt, 2 years after it started to. And guess what? You discovered that very exact same way. And I discovered by a receipt by accident 2 years after it had begun. And guess what? You discovered it that very way. 2 years. That was me, sitting all afternoon wondering about a house on stable sand that I really thought of as being on solid earth. 2 days later, Karen contacted me, saying that she couldn't make it to my house and wanted to meet me at the coffee shop, so neither of us would need to get into a shouting match in front of anyone. She explained everything very carefully, step by step. She had been informed nearly 2 years ago by one of Michael's workmates about a school function she saw 2 years ago where she ran into Michael with a small boy calling him Daddy. Just an innocent comment made by her workmate. She recalled how her coworker had mentioned it to her in a grocery store checkout line, and how it fell for her to see the reaction of her mind that her understanding of her marriage had basically been rearranged without her realizing it. Karen had already faced Michael this week. He had confessed to her. It had begun 5 years ago, when his wife Emma was not yet born, when he had met a woman at a conference, Denise. I asked her, "Why didn't you tell me before?" "Astute Frank," he said, but she said, "Don't," she said, "don't." "Astute Frank," he said, she said. "In addition to losing Mom, it would kill you off," he said. He was already closing it. He just hadn't got the time to do it right. He said, "I thought, or was hoping, that he was telling the truth, or I wanted to believe that he was telling the truth. And I told myself that I was keeping you safe. I know now I didn't protect you at all. It's only that I was protecting him. Has it come with an end?" I asked. She nodded her head reluctantly. "I don't believe it did come across the line, Frank. I believe he only created more effective techniques for ensuring that I don't see the receipts anymore. Until you did. They didn't send her to the door before we got to the last question. I didn't tell her one thing. Another which she told me she did not tell anybody, even her own sister. It's not been the betrayal herself," she said. "It has been the last 2 years. Well, it had been a little bit of math of that. She's spotting the ways that Michael seemed distracted, learning to notice him in the garage instead of the kitchen when the phone rang, learning to stifle her eyebrows, her face, her eyes when every glimpse of phone call was one fact that she had to put away. I have been so good at not reacting, Frank, that I'm a little frightened as to what it's done to me. No idea lately how to just show them without asking if it's okay to show it. Before we parted ways, I asked her one more question. Knows who I am. Denise details about Emma and Tyler. Karen said 2 years ago she suspected Denise had known for a while, and until that time when she got a bizarre, fleeting call 2 weeks ago from a woman who said she was interested in knowing if Michael's wife was aware of his daughter, Carriere supposed the scheme was a variation of losing him. Karen had hung up without answering. I was about to call Michael and ask him the question. This is a Lego house. What is going on? The second thing that I thought is, let's cancel it because it won't go. Is what my second thought is. I didn't either. So I realized at that coffee shop I was going to do something more like what I would now do when it was something really important about which I had to make a decision at the last moment. Dismiss passion, take my time, and do what feels right. So I was thinking I'll let Michael think everything is the same, and we'll go on planning this dinner the same way we had hoped it to go, and just see how he reacts under the assumption that his father knows nothing about the situation. That evening I called him to ask him where he wanted his seat to be, at the front or among Carol's old friends. He was quick to respond and appraising, jocular with his mother-in-law's predictable grumbles while sitting. At the end of the call, there was no transition. He just put it there, Dad, I'm thinking back to this one. Well, the whole family is back together again. That would have made Mom happy. I didn't say anything. I told him I know that too, but hung up after, and then I realized for the first time just how easy my son could have two conflicting truths in his voice one way and hide the other way. I will be candid on that front, too, as during this week, I was about to reveal all to Michael and walk away from the whole. I parked my vehicle outside his office one afternoon, turned the key, intending to walk down the hallway to see him in person, but the trick of exploring my own son was worse than his actual sin, some mornings. In the end, I didn't stop me strategy. It was Emma. That same afternoon, she phoned my cell phone from Karen's phone since, according to Daddy's assertions that day, he was too busy to take her out. She asked could I be there Friday at her school thing since it was something she had to do, and I was reassured by this. I realized I wasn't just discovering an affair. I was discovering an affair in a man who was my friend. I was exploring and thinking about and trying to comprehend just how much is a guy with a divided mind taking off the table my grandchildren's lives with delicacy, and that seemed like a thing I should be patient and correct on, even if it involved a few more days' worth of awkward pretending. So at least two things occurred the following week. A dinner for my late wife while I surreptitiously tried to get to know a second family unknown to me. I asked Karen whether she could still contact with Priya, who had been her co-worker, and told her that she had just heard about the school function from her. Reluctantly, but she did and agreed to try to contact me on my behalf, saying it was for an old paperwork, but it was just Frank asking her to update it through the office. On the second day, Priya called and was sweet, professional, and had no idea at all about it. During this discussion, she told Michael that he had been unusually agitated of late, snapping at his workmates over insignificant issues, and that the week before he had taken a day off, uncaring of the hours, after one of his phone calls panicked him out, and then left work running. She didn't know who it was, but she recalled the time very clearly. It was the afternoon the office seating chart was to be completed, and he'd left the office before finishing it. I compared that date to the one that Karen said. It was the same day she received his mysterious call asking her if Michael knew his daughter was concerned of her wife's. That happened when Michael was called by someone that afternoon as well. Someone was trying to get me both ways at the same time, and I wasn't yet satisfied with the reason. Just prior to that, however, I discovered one other on my own that I have yet to mention. 5 days before the dinner, I didn't deceive myself. I went back and looked at the shared credit card statement again, and again exactly this time, and I found a hotel expense from 2 months ago at an unknown town. It was a chain hotel, and it was dated a Friday that Michael said that he was at a work conference. I checked up online on the hotel. It also featured a cafe attached, the sort of place that people frequent for their anniversary or first date as opposed to a business meal. This was no call for me. I knew what I had to do. I couldn't approach it directly. Rather, I sat with a charge for 2 days, turning this lapel look over, pondering if it was because of Denise's story or if it was just a plain and simple charge. I was not yet aware that it was the property neither of me nor of anyone else. It was revealed to me 4 days before the dinner. I was at my mailbox when a car that wasn't familiar to me pulled up at the end of my driveway, idled there for a minute, then pulled off. The next morning, it was the same thing but slower. A woman couldn't be seen behind the wheel long enough for me to get a good look at her face. I got up on the third morning, early, and when the car slowed, I walked and didn't wait for it to go. Then turned, faced the boy, and was scared. Her window was lowered in. She seemed to be probably about 50 years old, dressed in a simple green coat, holding a large folder on her lap on the passenger side, whose pages were beginning to flutter out. I asked who you were, and why have you been passing by my house every morning for the past 3 days? Her fingers clutched the steering wheel, and she paused. My name is Denise, she said. Assuming that my recollections of what a florist receipt is like are accurate, I imagine you have an idea of why my visit has come to be. I was in my driveway, and I felt something come to a halt in my chest, and I asked her the one question that was all important. Why now? And why for all these years have you been driving right past my house when you knew my son had a secret? She didn't get out of the car right away. She helped me for chapter and verse the story that Karen had never heard. Both of them were, let's say, Michael, she and him, at an insurance conference 5 years earlier, where it had happened when neither of them expected it. Something had quietly turned into a second home, a second child. Michael being to birthday parties and school, in a life I had no knowledge of until I met her. She said for years that the arrangement would work out, that Michael would leave Karen decently. He promised her more times than she could count, that he had the right time. She had been faithful for longer than she ever thought, partly because her daughter Chloe loved him, but partly because it wasn't easy to leave some days, as she had created part of a lie herself. What was different, she said, was a phone call 15 days ago from my sister, the same week Michael began avoiding me on Sunday, and the same week Karen received that mysterious, excuse for her by some model question. At a hardware store, 2 towns away from home, Denise's sister had stumbled upon Michael, and he was hand-holding a woman who was definitely not Denise, but definitely not Karen either. I was standing in awe, waiting for that, waiting for a second crack in the ground under one of my houses that I had assumed already had as much as it could. I can't protect him anymore, Frank. My voice was whispery-voiced. I don't protect him anymore, Frank. My voice was whispered. I had been here for 5 years to defend a man who didn't have to choose any one of us. I asked her how she'd handle it. I told her I felt her anger, but specifically asked her if she meant to do something drastic, something that would hurt Chloe as well. The quiet lasted for a while longer, and then she said that she'd been calling Michael for 2 weeks, and he hadn't picked up once, and something clicked with her, and it finally became his answer. He had no intention of leaving anyone behind. He was going to make himself fade from their presence a little each day, so no one ever could ask at any one day that's when he went away. I told her what happened when I used to have dinner, and how I had gone away for 2 nights, and that was the next thing I had to say to a stranger at the end of my driveway. Slowly, she looked at me for a while, and inquired if I would allow her to come over. At first I was going to say, no. A part of me was still trying to find a way to save the evening I had invented to celebrate with Carol, a way to save it being the venue where my son went off the deep end. But I thought, why was it that people didn't tell Karen sooner? I wish I hadn't thought of 6-year-old Chloe who believed her dad had too much on his plate. Instead, he made an impassable lineup to avoid saying anything. At last I said to Denise, "If you're coming, where is it you think you'd like me to put you?" I said that Michael would just have to think that everything is the same. Don't allow him to come to that dinner assuming that he is still safe. Then allow truth to march behind him. The previous 2 days before the dinner, I phoned Michael twice on the same telephone, with each call about a perfectly mundane detail, the size of the cake, whether his father-in-law was a shellfish eater. Either time he responded fluidly, and seemed to have no concept that his father had spent the past week putting a new family together, one that he'd kept secret for 5 years. The night before, Karen dropped by and said, "Are you sure you pulled this leg, Karen?" Meaning that she wanted to see the seating chart, but it was actually a matter of consolation. I told her about Denise, the third woman that Michael had seen at the hardware store by his sister. Karen became deathly quiet, and then she informed him, "That is why the calendar. I saw the entry 2 weeks ago, an initial and then a time, 6 p.m., Thursday, and it was a client that Michael was seeing after work. I didn't think anything of it then. I do now." It was utterly still now in the room, save for the uncomfortable shuffling of Carol's aging acquaintances. And finally, one, who being on the whole an old friend named Walter, was quietly standing now, and began to usher the other guests towards the door. I, of course, sent my grandkids off to the lobby, before seeing what was coming. Too young, I think. Old enough, I suppose. As the adults all took in the scene, Tyler tugged at me and pulled me down the lobby to ask me one more question, but he finally had to put the kids to sleep. "Oh, is that the lady that lives with Grandpa going to be there at Christmas?" I couldn't think of an answer at the moment. I said that I just don't know right now, but if on any occasion you don't need to worry about it, grown-ups have grown-up problems to sort out. Satisfied with that, he nodded, and Karen's sister took him and Em out of the room, and I recall watching him go and thinking, do you think he's telling me what he's actually breaking? Rather than a mere marriage. The whole family's belongingism to one table or another. All of a sudden, when only Michael, Karen, Denise, and I were left in the room, I did something that I had wanted to say since that Saturday morning. There's one more woman, Michael. You were spotted together by Denise's sister 2 weeks ago at a hardware store. Your sister saw you with her 2 weeks ago at a hardware store. You both shared a calendar. Karen did a one-time search, which she found an entry correspond the same week. Only the initial was listed and the time. You don't have to verify this. I know I am aware now. Whatever it is you tell me after is true, or it is something that I will find out myself. It was then that Michael's face changed, the last of performance going out the window from him. Slowly he sat down again, in the chair he had knocked back, resting his head in his hands for a long moment before talking. His voice was muffled. Her name is Sarah. I came up with what came into my mind 5 days ago. I thought of the hotel fee I just found on the share card. The chain hotel which had the restaurant attached Friday. That day, they said, was a work conference. I thought of asking him, but as soon as he began to say so, he continued, without my bothering with the question, as if the door of confession was wide open and he couldn't shut it if once he opened it. It would allow the confession to escape. In March, we had initial stay in a hotel near her sister's house. He whispered. I was a part of the conference that weekend. I told you, I wasn't. Before I could even ask the question aloud, I'd been sitting there absorbing the idea that my quiet suspicion, which I'd buried in my mind for 5 days of the thing being hot, but what about I already knew it. I just now discovered myself, that it was actually a receipt from a hotel to be taken to the front desk. I've been acquainted with her for 4 months now. It was not supposed to matter. It's not serious. I don't know how to state it in some kind of manner without it sounding crazy. Try, I said. Tonight, there's only one chance for you. Not a squeaky clean confession came out over the next several minutes. It was stumbling. It was confusing at times. A man who wasn't sure what he wanted to say and, as all along, try and tell things he had previously never spoken crisply. He reminded us that when he was a young husband, the marriage of Karen was rough at best. He met Denise at a conference, and he told himself the reason he met her was because it was a temporary element, and that he would change that when things were better home, before Emma was born. Then Chloe was born, and when I had to choose, I could not leave Denise behind. No, I had to stay, and I had to tell a lie to my confused wife and make up for it with my daughter, who had no idea what was going on. Karen talked, as Denise had not walked in yet. And Sarah? Where does she fit in with both love/hatred being as much in love as they are in hatred? Michael took a pause to reflect before answering. Truthfully, he couldn't say that he knew anything about either of us, Sarah. She believes that I'm separated. I explained to her that I was divorced. I believe I may have wanted part of me to have had a different life that wasn't ruined before it even began. Denise, who had been standing unobtrusively beside the door, finally spoke, her voice hard with the anger that she had been bottling up. 5 years, Michael. 5 years of headlines that she was going to be properly disposed of. 0.5 years of assurances that you were going to dispose of her properly. 5 years of Chloe telling me about what happens at her school, and me just thinking that's true, because I want it to be that way. 0.5 years, and more often than not, 5 seconds of me believing you when Chloe asks why. Why isn't Daddy at her school? A wife, all along, who doesn't know me, and a third who doesn't know either. These 23 years. What was your number of lives? Michael was helpless, unable to find a solution. His shoulders turned down, and he looked like he had shrunk into his shoulders and looked smaller than ever before. I put to sleep all the questions I had under my nose since Saturday morning, and the one was there. Michael, know me? Does Chloe know me? Does she know that she had a grandfather, cousins, a whole family that would have loved her from the day that she was born if you told the truth? Slowly he shook his head and could not fix his gaze on me. No, he said. She only knows me as her father, who comes to see her occasionally. She is not informed of you. Become the answer to that with the affair itself, with the third woman, with the years of lying not have. She looked at me, reached out, touched me for so little while, said nothing, and in that gesture, I knew that she'd come to a similar conclusion herself at some point in the last few weeks, alone, and was just wanting someone to reach out to her and let her know that she was not alone in this reality. It is not Michael betraying Karen that has reeled me back. It was the things he did not do, understanding that somewhere an hour from my house, There was a 6-year-old girl who was my granddaughter and who was aware of me, but never once heard my name blush at the lips for nothing but my sincere and outspoken repugnance to the idea of announcing myself to my own daughter's child. Karen stood up and picked up her parka, as if a woman who, in the past 2 years, had been dancing around indecision, had finally resolved to do it, without being rushed or desperate. I'm going home with the kids tonight, Michael. Not our home. My sister's. But I don't want you around when I work out what the next thing is. And I don't want you to know and understand that whatever it is, it's not something you're going to manage as you've managed all the others. When Michael grabbed for her arm, she stepped back before him, but not dramatically, but so quietly. So last of all, as though it meant nothing at all, as though a line was being drawn that a man could not cross, that will not be crossed. I'm not doing it here in front of your father. In front of her, she said, nodding toward Denise. Not in front of her, vindictive little shrewd-up cunt. I'm here because, after all, I'm protecting a version of you that doesn't exist. I'm doing it because I finally understand. Then Denise retrieved the photo and studied it for several seconds as the sound of her voice diminishes and becomes more worn. I didn't come here to destroy your family, Frank. I came because my daughter's attitude was to not care that her father didn't show up. She was normal. I explained that I understood, and I explained something that I hadn't wanted to say. And now that I am saying it, I will. I want to get to know Chloe better. Properly. Whenever you're ready. She's my granddaughter, no matter what Michael has to say on the matter. And I'm not going to let another 5 years go by without her knowing it. Slowly, Denise nodded that it would be worth considering, that it wasn't a choice to be made while, around us, the table remnants of another anniversary dinner smoldered. I want to tell you about something I didn't fully acknowledge until the days immediately following the dinner, something that was not really significantly related to the betraying of Michael, but yet was intertwined with it. I had been sitting out in a stranger's house with my own son for 40 minutes with a family that I never would have bumped into in my everyday world, and had a story I didn't tell anyone and had been thinking about for 4 days as if nothing's different, wanting to celebrate the life of my late wife. Strategically, I knew why I might have made that silence, but still, I was not proud of it. The difference between these two is that one is a necessary silent while the other is a comfy one. And I couldn't tell during the 4 days which one was I living inside. But I had that question in my mind for 2 days in a row before I finally had up our nerve to call her and bring it up, mostly because I didn't want to hear the truth if she had an answer that put me in the same situation as Michael, and I had been letting weeks pass quietly judging Michael for his bad behavior. I called Denise about it. Not about Michael, of course, but because it was a few days after dinner when I had some questions I did not want to bother her with. I'm not sure, when we both lied to me on the phone 2 days before dinner, that I wasn't equally guilty of doing something wrong. By hating it with me, she didn't answer right away. She said that she would be with him every day for 5 years. I believe it may have been because of that, not the good-natured kind of stealth, not anyone that was good about staying quiet, however positive of an explanation that argument was. Michael called me in the morning the next day, voice hoarse, and asked if he could come by. I told him yes. He posed a question I think he never wanted to ask all the way over, sitting at the kitchen table where I would once carefully turn over a Karen sentence. You don't like me, do you, Dad? I don't hate you, Michael, but I'm not having quite the day I want. Oh, no. I don't know you like I thought, and that takes a long, long time to write. Don't be in denial about it anymore. You did not lie to her. You lied to me, lied to Denise, lied to a stranger and a nobody named Sarah that has no idea of all of this. And worst of all, you lied to 2 kids, and you let them grow up that way without us, not knowing that we're the cousins, the siblings, the grandkids that a man would want to have, knew from the beginning. There was nothing he disagreed with. At his own hands on my kitchen table, he sat in silence, as a man sitting at something that doesn't seem familiar anymore, that doesn't seem to belong to him anymore. Karen filed for divorce 3 weeks later. She had been mindful to the violation and had been considering for how long she could go along with it for 2 years, and now she simply had had enough of walking around with a yes in her head. This is not something that Sarah was told by Michael, nor was it directly known by any of the members of our family, but she learned within a month. This is not a secret Michael had told Sarah, nor was there anyone in our family who said it directly, but she found out within a month. Her sister had told Denise that a hardware store had someone named there who was maintaining the place. So Denise went there and got her name. The man she thought was divorced had two completely different families he was quietly handling for years, until that call came into her life 1 week later that she had no idea about. I felt for her, a girl who'd had no faults except to believe in a guy who had spent his grown life living on the expectation of others' trust. I never knew her, and I doubt I ever will. But somehow, I thought about her more times than I ever thought I could about someone I didn't know, wondering perhaps if her family was luckier than the one she was almost placed in. It's been 6 or 8 weeks after the dinner before Denise and I met properly, with no witnesses in the restaurant. The second time she brought Chloe with her, and as soon as I saw her, I knew she had no idea how to behave, watchful as it was. Her eyes as it was like that of her father, and as soon as I noticed how her eyes worked, I noticed how her father would study a room before sitting in it. I knew she too must be the same, minus the job description. Very carefully, in the simplest terms possible, I told her, telling her that I was her grandfather, telling her that I had a whole family which did not know her, but would know her now. She worked something out in her serious little face, and asked if she had cousins. I said yes, a boy and a girl, about her age. With only the first smile from her I ever saw, she said she wanted cousins as far back as when she was a little girl. For all those before that smile, there was a stiffer moment I haven't mentioned. About halfway through that first occasion, Chloe stopped me suddenly and without a warning or rhyme or reason. "Am I doing something wrong with Daddy?" I explained that I was having some hard feelings, and it's the most honest answer I could give a 6-year-old. She took in the words slowly and then made a statement that I pondered for many weeks after. "That's okay. I do get mad at him when he doesn't. Sometimes." I just couldn't say anything at that point. Just told her that made sense. Adults don't always do things right. Not her responsibility. Like children do when they don't quite understand something adults have not figured out. She replied that time, as if her cousins had never been mentioned, and a few minutes later she was asking again. For years old, oh Emma, much too young to have known dealing with all that went on that night. You asked me something different from your brother weeks later, as I read to you on the lap on his parents' bed before he went to sleep. "Daddy, why don't you live with us, Grandpa?" I told her as carefully and tenderly as I could for a 4-year-old that sometimes grown-up make decisions that they will no longer live together. And it was nothing she and Tyler did wrong. She took a second look for a moment. A second look like the eyes of small children consider things entirely seriously, and she asked me if I still had Sunday time to see me. Forgetting to ask happens. So I said yes, always. She seemed content with that reply for that night anyway. I knew that, as I watched her sleeping, that some of the questions were just starting, that as she grew older, she and Tyler would have asked tougher questions than these, and that none of us could have ever really prepared to help her deal with them. The two sets of cousins didn't meet until almost 4 months later, in a small, awkward meeting in a park halfway between our two towns, where Karen was there, even if she was divorcing Michael. Because here, she said quite simply, it is not Chloe's fault. For the first 20 minutes, I watched Emma and Chloe looking over one another suspiciously, making cautious eye contact and waiting, only for Tyler, on his own, to hold out an offering of half of his snack, and asking her to see the frog he had discovered near the pond. All three of them couldn't be parted within 1 hour. I want to be honest. It doesn't really make me feel like I'm in a redemption story with Michael, as I think a lot of us hoping for one weren't. He visits Chloe more often these days, which is good, but Denise has explained that it doesn't earn her trust all at once, but gradually. He and Karen are businesslike and but functionary with regard to Emma and Tyler. No more. My relationship with him is the oddest of all, that of father and son who love each other in the old-fashioned way beneath the layers, and who both know that love isn't the same as trust, and that one of those two will take a tremendous amount longer to mend up. Reads me a picture of whatever he and Chloe did on Sunday, 5 months in without provocation or explanation. just a pic of whatever they did. I didn't request them to do it. It wasn't a lie that I picked up on with him. It was something I noticed the same way that a Tuesday florist costs, or anything I noticed that was really unusual and up to no good. I believe this was a silent way of explaining to me that he really wanted something to change, and maybe it did, but he didn't yet want me to know. I'm not collecting any of those pictures, but there are all of them in a folder on my cell phone, just like I'm keeping all of those receipts and calendar entries in a folder on my cell phone, but without the evidence of the lie. I'm collecting data as I take it in, and then, very carefully, to see if the man I'm watching is different than the man who sat at that restaurant table. Curiously, Karen and Denise turned out to be kind of allies to each other in the months that followed, two women who had been lied by the same man, toward each other, each a different voice of the same lie. They did not become great friends, but 3 months after the park meeting, Karen told Emma that she wants Chloe to attend Emma's birthday party that spring, which Emma said she would love to do, though it was something she was reluctant to do at first. Denise said, at that party, when the punch was being passed, I saw the two of them standing side by side, not talking about Michael, talking about their daughters. I asked Karen one day months later if it felt awkward on her part, as it was a case of, let's say, friendly with a woman her husband had dated for years and had a second family with. For a while, she considered who would come to rescue her and what it would look like. I knew it was going to be a weird feeling. She says, it doesn't, though. I believe this is because we weren't really in competition with each other. We were both just guys that he fibbed us. The hurt person is rather easy to say a nice word to than the actual hurter. 8 months later one Sunday, Michael was at my house as he had been each week prior to all this in the lead-up, and he asked me a question that I wasn't expecting at all. I guess is my question that I never loved any of them. Do you think I am just one of those guys that is good at saying what people want to hear around Dad? I actually pondered over that question a while longer than he probably had anticipated. I told him that I thought that he liked them, that I felt like he liked them in some hurtful and partial way, and that if a man likes you, he is willing to tell falsehoods for years on end. Love without honesty isn't love, Michael. It's the departure of attachment only with nicer ways of talking. It's possible to feel love for someone and remain their coward. But after this, it was a nodding that drew a long, great length of pause before he spoke a second time, out at my backyard for a long while. I feel like, for a long time, I've had to do a lot of emotional management as far as everybody else's feelings about me, and I think I forgot about the way to just explain the truth to people, and then just let them have whatever feelings came to them. I believe that is what I need to work on. Not the exact lies, but the types of lies. All that habitat below them. I believe this was the first truly honest comment my son had made towards me since this tale started. But before he left this afternoon, I asked him what I hadn't asked outright, cinematically. Have you attempted to call Sarah since and make proper amends not to take Denise's phone call as a final word? He shook his head. It's an idea that I've been pondering over this past week. I don't know if it would help her or just if it would help clear my conscience, but I figured I wouldn't be able to tell the difference right now and reach out just for that anyway. Strangely, one of the more grown man things that he said to me during this whole process is that when you can't trust your own motives, it's its own kind of honesty. I told him that if he was ready, and if he ever would be, that his honesty would be more to Sarah than any speech he could muster up in advance. He nodded slowly this time. For a minute, I saw something in his face that I hadn't seen since my childhood, the kind of face that will seek out advice but do it with great earnestness, or at least the appearance of it. Every few weeks or so, Carol's old friend Walter calls me, always talking about that evening, without making a single mention of the events that had occurred unless I had, since the time of Carol's death. For some, an invitation to questions is the least helpful gesture for someone who is in mourning. Every time it comes back around, it's to show up. My second anniversary dinner was at my own place this year, smaller than before, than at Corrigan's, for there I was not ready to step back into that private room this year. Karen arrived, alone with no Michael, with Emma and Tyler. Then there was Denise, too, and Chloe, a determination which, when I first sat in the driveway, A year ago, to wait for her to come back from a cruise would have been hard to imagine. I told Michael that I had one evening, that's it, that I needed to go see Carol and the family who had come in the wreckage of what he had left behind. It wasn't cruel, but it was because he was not invited, and I was honest with him. I'd seen all three of my grandchildren squabble gamely over who got the smallest piece of cake, and they were completely unconcerned by the convoluted adult story that had brought them to the table. They had a little cardboard boxcar for us to open, which Denise told me later she had insisted that she have to make quite a bit of it. Actually, a face of all of us, I guess, 6 stick people and a cake with too many candles to be counted that we couldn't even match up. Hoping she never would, she had written carefully in the 6-year-old hand, "Happy anniversary, Grandpa and Grandma." I hung on to that drawing. It is now on my refrigerator with a picture of Carol that we took for our actual 40th anniversary, and 2 pictures of 2 different tables, but somehow it feels like they should be matched. As I observed them, a feeling of release crossed my chest in a first for more than a year. Toward the end of the evening, and after the children had gone off to the living room, leaving Denise and myself at the table, I finally got around to asking her something I had been thinking since the first hard conversation I had when I was in my driveway. Why the dinner? That is, she did not need to call anyone else because she could have called Karen straight away. She would have been coming to his office. She might have been sent home without a word being said. She might have gone totally silent and walked away. She said she was wanting people there that couldn't be reasoned out of what they saw. But she said that Michael was an adept at explaining away things when he was alone with people to take them apart. He had been doing this to her for years, and she had seen him do it.